Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World. We talk about a lot of issues with Your Black World. One of the things that we discuss is the way women are treated in our society. Many of us know that violence against women is not taken seriously. Many of us know that we live in a sexist society. And I think that given that women are now the majority of the workforce, it's time that we confront some of these issues and talk about them in public. And one person that loves to talk about these sorts of issues is Crystal Hayes. Crystal is, she's a scholar, she's a feminist, she's an activist, she's a strong woman, she has a lot to say. And I've got Crystal on the line, and I want you guys to get a chance to hear what she has to say. Crystal, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing, Boyce?
I'm doing very well. Now, I want to ask you, can you, for the audience, kind of describe your educational background, where you teach and stuff like that, just so people can kind of get to know who you are?
Sure, absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for inviting me to talk to Your Black World. I am a follower, and I really do appreciate this opportunity to talk to your audience. I am a trained social worker. I have a master's degree in clinical social work. I went to the Smith College School for Social Work in Western Massachusetts, and I currently am teaching in a graduate program here in North Carolina. I sort of like to tease folks when I say I'm an accidental academic. It wasn't something that I intentionally sought out. I enjoy working with students. I enjoy working with practitioners and activists and scholars and just being engaged in the community at a variety of different levels because the issues that we're faced with here are require that folks are working in collaboration with one another. So I've been working here at a university here for the past year teaching nearly full-time courses at the graduate level mostly and a couple of classes at the undergraduate level. I also have a background in activism. I spent a lot of years doing community-based mental health as well. Prior to that, I did a lot of stuff around reproductive health justice work, prison reform work, and activism. I did some work around education reform, education justice, and equity work. And prior to teaching, as I said earlier, my practice was in community-based mental health. I was working with mamas who were parenting under duress, who were, managing, severe psychopathology, like schizophrenia, to stuff like, depression and, of course, poverty and, anything and everything that you can think of that would make it really difficult for someone to parent a kid successfely.
Wow, so you've done a lot. You're active, to say the least. You also have a first-hand experience dealing with the prison industrial complex. You and I both, and I hope you don't mind me even mentioning this, but we won't go into it because you'd mentioned that you wanted to talk about this at a later date. But you and I both share the fact that we had a father who was incarcerated,
Right.
And I think that there are a lot of people listening who have experienced it firsthand as well. And I think that sometimes that's where our greatest revolutionaries come from. It's from the pain of kind of dealing with oppression up close. Now,
right.
Let's talk about your tweet chat last night. You had a chat on Twitter that I think people should join. And your Twitter handle, if I'm not mistaken, is Mother Justice. In case people follow you. And can you tell us about that chat and what the purpose was?
Sure, absolutely. Well, let me back up a little bit by saying I had the opportunity to go to South Africa recently. I visited Cape Town as part of a project that I'm developing to do a social justice class in Cape Town next summer with social work students, practitioners, activists, educators who are, thinking really deeply about the world that we're living in today and trying to figure out how to increase opportunities for folks, not just in their own communities, but globally. And, as we all know, South Africa is situated in this sort of unique space right now. Like, they're a pretty young democracy. They're still managing these different political transitions and transformations from being an apartheid, going from racial apartheid to democracy. And unfortunately, they're still struggling with another form of apartheid, economic apartheid. And so I had a fabulous opportunity to go visit and meet with some academics and some activists and some advocacy organizations who are struggling with addressing violence against women in their community. It's pretty epidemic in South Africa right now. I believe that I read some horrifying statistics that South Africa is the only country in the world where women die before men. And so I think that that's pretty, horrifying and compelling, and we should all really care about it for a number of reasons. It's a problem there, it's a problem here, and so I met with folks there, and that was a pretty productive meeting. I came back to the United States after meeting and learned that there was a case in the media over the last several years where a young girl, 5 years old, had been sexually assaulted and murdered. Her name is Shania Davis. She's from Fayetteville, North Carolina. And this happened in 2009, and over the last several years, there was an investigation and a trial. So the moment I got back to the States, I learned that the man who was accused of her murder had been convicted, and he was waiting to be sentenced. But he was convicted for the murder, but not the actual sexual assault. And I'm not a rape investigator. I wasn't involved with the case or the trial. So I don't really want to speak on the details of that necessarily, but what I will say is it impacted me. As a survivor myself, the thing that I responded to was the fact that the justice that this young girl received and her family received was not full justice. Whether or not this person was responsible for the sexual assault, I believe he knew who committed that crime against her. And so I was just devastated. I felt overwhelmed. I was full of rage and angry, and I didn't know what to do with those feelings and those emotions. And so I began to write, and I wrote an op-ed piece about the prevalence of violence against women in our culture, and how women just are not safe. If we can't keep babies safe at 5 years old, we can't expect to keep anybody safe, right? So I wrote this piece, and then I started to talk to some colleagues, and one thing led to another, and we ended up organizing a live tweet chat discussion last night. Just to talk to people in the world about, what's happening in our culture. Like, how can we address this issue that seems to be spiraling out of control? Like, I even said to a friend recently, I said, I don't know whether or not there's a spike in gender-based violence right now, or if I'm so attuned to it that I hear it and I see it everywhere. But it feels like it's happening quite a bit, and it's not getting better fast enough for me. And so we had this discussion. We had this discussion with social work students. We had this discussion with advocates. We had this discussion with people who are on the front lines. And we talked to each other about what the priorities are for dealing with this issue. We talked about what should be the educational priorities for students who want to go into the field and work with survivors. Are the programs that are available to folks adequately training people to work with survivors? What are some of the policy priorities that we should be advocating for, at the local and state level and national level? Do people in the community feel like they're safe enough to report an incident? What are the tools and the trainings that people need and education that people need in order to address this in their own community, in their own institution? So, we had this pretty lively conversation, and if you're on Twitter and you know anything about Twitter, it can be kind of overwhelming. So we made a decision last night that we were going to have a part 2, maybe even part 3 or 4 discussion just to keep it going, because, I could tell based on some of the questions and some of the responses that, this is something that I'm not just thinking about, that people are thinking about this all over the place, and we're all struggling with how to manage it and how to solve it.
Well, I agree with you. I think that the conversation is very important. And earlier I was telling you about people like Salah Abrams and others who are right on board with what you're doing. And I think it's important to speak on this issue. My personal bias comes from the fact that I have daughters that I'm trying to raise in a world that isn't always supportive of women and what they're seeking to do. And so, that's what's encouraged me to also work past my own sexism on this, because I feel that we live in a sexist, racist society, and all of us are infected by some of this on some level. And the best we can do is to work hard to cure ourselves and to become more aware. So now, with that said, I want to ask you one more quick question. So, what are your plans for the future in terms of how you want to translate your scholarship and your exhaustive background into actionable steps that other people can support and be a part of? What is your hope in terms of how you can contribute to what's kind of going on in our world? I mean, you mentioned the Sinai Davis case, which really touched my heart, because I mean she was such a beautiful little girl too. I mean I say that should be important, but I mean she was such an adorable child, and you think to yourself, who would hurt a child like this? I mean, who would hurt any child, little in general? But when we see this sort of thing, and this is what makes me value people like yourself with a social work background who are still wired to care. I think some of us become numb to what's going on in our world. We just can't.
Right.
Feel like it's too much.
And I think going back to the Shania Davis just for a quick moment, I think the question has to be asked too. Could that death have been prevented? They were on the radar. I don't at this point. I'm not interested in necessarily passing blame, but I do think that folks need to be thinking about, if you see something in a community, if you see something in a school, something just doesn't feel quite right to you, we need to be paying attention to that. We need to report. We need to be in conversation with each other about what are some of the red flags, what are the risk factors, so that we can flag the authorities, so we can make sure that kids are safe, make sure that, if there's a mom who may have a substance abuse problem or a mental health issue, that people are in treatment and have access to the resources that they need. Unfortunately, I live in the state of North Carolina, where right now a General Assembly is doing everything in their power to dismantle the safety net here. And so, things are going to get worse before they get better. I mean, they're blocking Medicaid expansion in our state. They're cutting off people's unemployment insurance and benefits. They're making it really, really difficult, for families to survive. And when you push people to the edge like that, they jump, right? And so we're going to see a lot more disaster before we see things get better, and that's what scares me. Because I think the Shania Davis case could have been prevented. I think a lot of cases out there could be prevented, but we need the tools, we need the resources, and we need the support, and we need the leadership from not just our public elected officials, but we also need the leadership from community folks to step up to the plate and make sure that we're, designing a world that's safe for women and children. And right now, we're just simply not doing it.
Well, there you go. Now, people listening, why I have really been pushing Crystal to be a contributor at Your Black World, because she has a lot to say, and she has the intelligence and the passion for the issues that I think make her a tremendous asset to the community. So one more time, I want to make sure people know your Twitter handle so they can follow you. Her Twitter handle is Mother Justice, and I encourage all of you who have a mind for justice to not just follow Crystal, but to also get involved with some of these conversations, these initiatives, because as she mentioned, when we step up to the plate, someone benefits, some child can benefit from that. And when we choose not to step up to the plate, some child is being affected as well. So whether you act or choose not to act, there is always a reaction. There is always a repercussion. So let's keep that in mind. So I want to say thank you very much for your time, Crystal. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. I really do appreciate this, too.
Absolutely. The pleasure is all mine. And thank you all for checking us out at yourblackworld.com. And until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.
Peace.